Great. So thank you all for joining this webinar, which is a follow-on to a podcast that we did with RBP accountants recently. So I imagine a lot of you have heard that. You may not all have done so, but that's fine. But the topic of this webinar is very much for us to explain how we support practices with their drugs income. So it's to explain the Compass revenue assurance system that we have. So, I make no apology for the fact that it is very much about us setting out our stall so that you as practices can decide if it's something for you. So therefore, the subtitle of my webinar is Maximizing Drugs Profits, because that's what we aim to do. And that's the system we've built and what that aims to do as well. So I will say there's lots of other things I could happily talk all day about, but I'm going to try and keep this to an hour. There are opportunities to learn more about this whole area. And again, I'll give you details about that at the end. Now, just for me to, well, firstly, just to set the scene here, this is relevant for both prescribing only practices and dispensing practices. The service we provide differs slightly for each of them. So the first thing I want to do is actually ask you a question, which I'll aim to do here. Da, da, da. So if you can just quickly look at your chat and just answer the question for me about whether you're prescribing only or dispensing practice, that'd be great because that means that I can get a sense of who's actually on the webinar. So just check your chat, and you should see a question there, and you should be able to respond to that. Okay, so 93% prescribing only, just a handful of dispensing. That's absolutely fine. So, all right. So my name's Richard, and our company Ashlane is set up by myself and my wife Tracy. We set this company up over 10 years ago. Before that, Tracy was a practice manager. She was responsible for the claims, for the drugs claims for her practice. But we actually met way before then when we were at university. Tracy was studying computer science. So she was frustrated by the claims process. She knew there must be a logical business model and a set of business rules. And all you had to do was thoroughly understand it, apply it, and the money would follow. So she set about researching it, and together we spent a lot of time, almost pulling it apart to understand in great detail how it works. The more we researched, the more we discovered confusion, ambiguity, lack of information, pitfalls, and practices across the country are struggling to know whether they've been paid for everything. So we use that knowledge to then develop an improved approach, one that helps practices ensure you receive all the income you're due for your drugs. Um, but as important as that is knowing whether or not you have received all the income. That's what I call strategic control. It's important because you might be getting all the income you're due, which is great. But if something were to go wrong, how long would it take you to notice? Would you know if you weren't or if you were receiving everything or not? So that's what we've embedded into this Compass service we provide. It augments what you're doing to give you that control and to ensure you are getting all the money you're due. As I mentioned, we've been operating for over 10 years. We've worked with literally hundreds of practices, but we never advertise. We kept very busy just because we get lots of referrals, and through word of mouth, practices come and beat a path to our door. So if you haven't heard from us, it's because we say we don't advertise, but you can read lots of reviews about us online. So at the heart of what we're discussing here is your drugs income. And really, these are the questions I want to help you grapple with. Are you confident you're being reimbursed for all of your drugs? Do you have a process that would alert you to errors? And actually, beyond that, do you get management information to ultimately ensure that you can maximize your profits? Because that really is why we're doing this. So again, I'm going to now ask you another quick question to get an answer to that. So just bear with me again. So again, if you check your chat and if you could quickly check the questions I'm about to launch. So yeah, quick bit of feedback. What are your concerns about your FP34 claims and your drugs payments? Which of these ones are relevant to you? You can tick as many as you like, but it gives me again, it gives me a quick snapshot of where people are with their claims. Okay, so that's really interesting to see the results coming in. You can hopefully all see those results. It's a broad spectrum. Knowing what's claimable, um, not knowing whether you've been paid correctly, reducing profits, you don't think you're claiming for everything, and you just don't have the time. So yeah, that's that's the kind of common response that I get. So what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about personally administered items. So these are drugs, medicines, devices that you purchase, and I've underlined that word purchase, that you've used and then could be reimbursed for. There's a long list of items on that list. It includes vaccines, it includes pretty much anything you inject, it includes anesthetics, coils, cancer drugs, some sutures. Um, Confusingly, though, there are many things that you think could be claimable which aren't. So it doesn't include prednisolone tablets or salbutamol nipules. It doesn't include dressings. And you can't claim for all the vaccines because you get some of them for free from Inform. And if you haven't purchased it, you can't claim for it. Your clinicians may not know which are the ones that were free and which weren't. So again, it can be quite confusing. So at the very heart of the problem is the fact you're relying on your clinicians knowing what's claimable because they're the ones who initiate the claim. They raise an FP10 or they code EMIS or System 1, and that's what results in a claim. But do all your clinicians know what's claimable? If they do know, great, but then do they remember to do it every time? And do they do this every time without making an error? And with the best will in the world, it's a very busy environment they're working in, errors are going to creep in. Now, the question I'm almost always asked is there a list? Well, yes, there is a list. And just to give you a kind of a kind of a quick peek at the list, it's shown here. These are the common items. There are 3,000 odd items that you could be purchasing and claiming. You could download it if you'd like, but it's not really that useful because nobody can work off a list of 3,000 items. But that's just to give you a flavor of the sort of things you should be looking for at your practice to claim, providing you purchase them. And again, you need to look at this end to end because the person doing the claims may not know what's being purchased. So be careful about saying to them, oh, claim for these, because if you don't purchase them, you can't claim them. Okay, so that's for the prescribing only practices, what we're talking about. For the dispensing practices, it's your dispensary as well. They're all lumped together. So some of the issues then you experience. Oh, I should say, absolutely welcome questions. Just because of the number of people, what I'm planning to do is rattle through these slides and then please fire in questions. But by all means, send in questions via chat, and I'll look at those later in the webinar. So what's the reason for this being so problematic? Well, it's just the nature of the whole way this works. You're relying on all of your clinicians using these items and remembering to claim throughout the month. At the end of the month, you then collate everything into an FP34 submission. So that's the opportunity to actually correct any errors that may have occurred, find anything that's been missed, and then you send it off. Most practices, then, that's really the end of it. That's all they really think about. However, that's just the start of a process that results in you being paid 2 months later. Your claim goes to prescription services. They process the claim. It then goes to PCSE, who further process it, and eventually you see a drug statement. The drug statement looks like this. It's got an amount of money on it. If you look down, there's some more information, but yeah, it's not particularly clear. So again, most practices really wouldn't be analyzing it to know what it's actually what it means. Now, the kind of issues then to be aware of, to look out for, if you like, are firstly when you're giving the items. Well, as I've already mentioned, it's fraught with problems. Not knowing what's claimable, not necessarily claiming everything, the fact there's so many people involved and these people come and go. Then you've got the process at the end of the month. You may or may not be counting everything to compare what's being claimed with what should have been claimed. It's quite common for the wrong item to be claimed. And then practices will often use searches. Searches are good, but they can be confusing. So it depends where you've obtained the searches from and whether you fully understand what the results mean when they provide you with those results. Your claim then goes off, but I'm sorry to say that errors can continue. And I say this because these are errors that we regularly find. Oh, but before I come on to that, I'll again just mention for the dispensing practices, the fact that your claim includes everything, your dispensed drugs and your personally administered. And your dispensary, whilst it's a lot less error prone, there's still opportunity to influence your profits with some of the things that can go wrong. So when your claim is received by prescription services, they process it. But examples of some of the errors we've seen before now are that they sometimes might miss items, they sometimes might not pay the volume vaccines, they sometimes pay the wrong items. Of course, not very often, but you need to know whether or not it's affected your practice. In theory, the items they process should then all be paid to you, but it goes to prescription PCSE in a schedule of payment. You don't get to see that, but that's what happens. And PCSE, funnily enough, can also occasionally make mistakes. We've seen examples where dispensing fees haven't been paid, where a GP hasn't been paid. You might have been contacted about the pool list issue. This was a very widespread issue that affected lots of practices where money was withheld from them and items not being paid. So going back to those questions I asked you earlier about whether you were worried about your income and it may have dropped off and your profits may have dropped, well, the question to kind of answer is, well, which of these is the reason? Which of these problems have affected your practice and affected your income? Or is it several of them? But the other thing you really got to kind of realize from this is that you follow this process every month, 12 times a year. So every month you need to be confident that none of these errors or issues have cropped up. So how can you fix it? What do you need to do? Well, there's just three things to do to maximize your income and your profits. One, make sure you claim for everything. So that generally requires you to have an improved process. You need to tighten it up. Um, Errors have crept in, and you need a process that will uncover and fix those errors before the claim goes off. Again, I'm not in the scope of today's webinar, but in other webinars, we cover information on how to do that. The second thing then is to ensure that everything you claim is actually paid. And that's what I'm focusing on today. This concept of revenue assurance, which up until we came along, not many practices were doing. So it's absolutely vital to ensure that you check your payments are complete, because if you don't, nobody will. But the third thing is you actually need to make sure you're making a profit, because many times we help practices with this and find that they're claiming items, they're being paid, but they're losing money every time they do it. So of course, the more they do, the more they lose. If you do those three things, you will absolutely be maximizing your income and profits. You'll be making a good profit from your personally administered items. 30+% is quite possible. But the challenge for practices is that to do those three things really thoroughly is complicated. The data you need is out there, but it's difficult to obtain. It's hard to understand. It's time consuming. So issues can therefore go unnoticed. It's often accountants who recommend that we come into a practice because they can see the headline numbers, but they're looking at your annual accounts. They may be 18 months old. So trying to identify the the issue and fix it is quite difficult at that point. And you've always got the challenge of staff turnover, meaning that issues can recur as new members of staff come in, and the environment's changing all the time. So, yeah, you could be on top of things one year, but then the NHS have a habit of changing things. So a new change comes into effect, which you didn't realize, or it results in an issue which was just cropped up. And as I mentioned, we've been doing this for over 10 years. Every year we encounter some new issue which didn't exist before. But the other real challenge is that you only do this process 12 times a year, once a month. So trying to maintain the knowledge and the skill and the ability to put in place all of these checks is really, really difficult when you do something so infrequently. And then for dispensing practices, in addition, the personally administered item income is there, but it's masked by the dispensary income, which is probably 95% of your income. So it's almost invisible to you. So practice managers, we find, are generally just struggling to keep on top of this, to do the necessary checks. And that we find is resulting in practices underclaiming or paying too much, or either way, having their profits impacted. So what can be done about it? Well, in the past, we still do. We regularly provide training. We implement improvements within practice operations to improve things. But we now provide an ongoing service, which is called Compass. And we do that because practices have asked for it. They've said it's great to have the knowledge to know what to do, but actually we just want the help in doing it every month. There's two variants. For prescribing only, it's Compass PPA Revenue Assurance. For dispensing practices, it's Compass Dispensary Revenue Assurance. The difference being the dispensing practices, we look after the whole dispensary income as well. So I'll talk about the prescribing only practices first, but the principles are the same for both. So let me explain what I mean by revenue assurance. So revenue assurance is a concept that means that you check the revenue you receive is correct. So it's a process because you have to do it every month, and a system because it's just too difficult to do otherwise. So it's there to ensure all the revenue is received for the services and products provided. And it enables you to spot if revenue leakage is starting to occur as soon as it starts. And that's the thing. Practices will notice their income is down if it's dropped by £20,000, but they might not notice if it's dropped by £200. But that's what I call revenue leakage, and unchecked, it will only ever grow. So it allows you to identify it and fix it before it has an impact, regardless of whether it's something that's gone wrong internally or externally. Regardless, it's about spotting it and fixing it. So what we found is that practices are rarely doing this, and as a result, revenue leakage can occur and go unnoticed for a long time. So this is what we've implemented through Compass. So going back to this overview then of what's happening in the practice, how can we help? Well, we support the practices with the Compass system. So it's an online portal that features at its heart the Compass calculator. It's backed up by us, by our team, and by training. So we provide you with the knowledge to claim and know what to claim. But each month we're supporting the claim process. The Compass calculator lists the claimable items, so it's got the list in there built in. It includes the basic price for all of the items, which is updated every month. If you populate it with what you're actually claiming that month, it will calculate exactly how much you're going to be paid. So before the claim goes off, you've got a record of it and you know what to expect. But in addition, you can add to it the cost of the items, because by doing that, for the first time for many practices, it kind of brings these things together and you can decide or see whether you're making a profit and decide whether you should continue to purchase the item. For example, Depo-Provera, the refund rate, the basic price is £6 and a penny. Because of the way that reimbursement works, for these 20 this month, you'll be paid £187. Now, the cost price depends on your supplier. It should be only £6 and a penny. That really should be the maximum you're paying. If it is, then you'll make a £60 profit this month. But if any of these profit figures were negative, alarm bells would be ringing and you would do something about it. Now, there is only a tiny number of PAIs that do not make a profit. We're talking about less than half a dozen. So therefore, you should be looking to make sure you're purchasing correctly to get a profit on everything. But that's, if you like, a secondary benefit. The main benefit is that you now know what you're going to be paid. So, oops, sorry. So we've supported you in claiming. We've using the Compass tool, you've been able to capture a record of what you're claiming. 2 months later, you get paid. It takes that long before you get the PCSE statement. We plug into PCSE and are able to pull your data, obviously with your permission, as in you've granted us the access, into Compass, and we combine the PCSE statement with the Compass calculator and provide you with a revenue assurance report for that month straight away. So for this example of July, as soon as the report's available from PCSE, we compare it with Compass and we're able to tell you the payment is correct. It's in line with the claim. Everything's fine. We look at how much you've been paid. We compare that with the forecast from Compass. In addition, we also look at the number of items paid and we compare that to what you've claimed. We check for any adjustments and we look at all the GPs and the split of the payment between them. Because we're doing this every month, we also update the trend of the year as the year's progressing, of claims and payments. Again, looking for any small errors that might be sneaking in and building. So we do all of that every month because if we spot an error, if we spot a problem, well, we're 9 times out of 10 able to tell you why and what's caused it and help resolve it. And because we're doing it straight away, not at the end of the year, it means you can nip it in the bud. So that's the principle of Compass and how we support practices. As I mentioned, backed up by us so that we're there to answer questions. So as I mentioned, maintaining the knowledge of staff in this area is a challenge. So they can get on top of it 1 month, but that knowledge can drift depending on who's involved when you have to hand it over from one member of staff to another. And when new rules come in, when the environment changes and there's new information to sort of assimilate and work out what it means. So we're there proactively providing that help to all of our practices. Now, oops, sorry. For dispensing practices, very quickly, it's the same concept. The only addition, or the addition now, is that it includes the dispensary. So we support both the dispensary and the personally administered items. All of the items come together, and we're able to provide the same principles to this, which is checking the PCSE statement compared to the claim. We don't quantify the amount of money. The reason for that is it would just be far too much work for you and for us because of the many thousands of items that you're now processing every month. But we still apply the same principles to track what you're claiming compared to what you're being paid. So to reiterate, the ongoing support is practices find really invaluable because it just means that it's one less thing for them to worry about. The fact that we're worrying about this every day means that we can provide them with information when needed. I've mentioned that there is training available. You can go onto our website, you can access the webinars, you can join them. Well, if you're a Compass practice, they're all included within the price free of charge. Now, that's the core of the service, an ongoing service for as long as practices feel it's valuable. But optionally, we do other things as well. When we take on a practice, they have the option to request these additional services. We can recover missed income for personally administered items. We can go back up to 6 years. The statement of financial entitlement allows for a back claim to be generated for up to 6 years. However, you've got to be really careful when you do this. We check the clinical system from remote access. We can log into EMIS System 1 and look through all patient records, looking for any instance of a drug being given but not properly coded. So that means we can prepare a back claim It's submitted and we deal with any queries that may result. And ultimately, you'll get paid. And we only get paid if you get paid. But great care is needed. And I can't emphasize this strongly enough. You must only back claim for items that you are absolutely sure were purchased by the practice, given to a patient at the practice, were not claimed at the time, and were not claimed subsequently. Only if you're sure about those can you claim. And I say that because I come across practices who've been told they can back claim. They go ahead and generate a back claim, and I have to give them the news that some of the items they've claimed were never purchased. And the person doing the claim didn't know that, so they just found that a B12 was given, no prescription generated. Well, in that example, the patient had gone to the pharmacy with the prescription, brought it to the practice, and that's what had happened. You cannot claim in that instance. So with great care, we can do that and generate a back claim. If we do that work, then if we recover a lot of money, then that would indicate there's clearly issues in the practice. So although we provide lots of training, and as I say, that's really, we literally train you with everything we've got, practices can often request us to what I call embed the process, which means actually implement this improved process at your practice, including providing you with our suite of searches. So our searches, we just know work because they're designed by us and specifically for the task of identifying per-statement items. So yes, this optional extra includes that, and with those searches, you get annual updates. And we go as far as generating an FP34 with you just to make sure your team are completely confident. The Ashlane process is one that we have developed that features additional checks. It features tools, our searches, and additional checks just to make sure that the claim is complete and nothing gets overlooked. Okay, so the costs. The core of the service is Compass. It's provided as a monthly service with a monthly fee. There's no minimum term, so you literally only pay for as long as you want the service, and there is no upfront cost. For prescribing only practices, it's £55 plus VAT per month. Dispensing practices, same principle. The fees are higher though, because as I mentioned, you're now talking about 10 times as much value. So, because we're looking after both the dispensary and the personally administered items, the fees are higher. The fees are based on the size of the dispensary, based on the income of the practice for drugs, and they're shown there. So with that fee, you get everything I've discussed, with the exception of the optional extra items. So you get the use of the Compass system, the training that we provide as well, and then most importantly, you get the monthly revenue assurance reports. In other words, we're doing that job for you. If we're not doing it, then somebody else needs to. So you've then got to factor in the cost of that person doing the kind of checks I've been talking about. But again, I can only tell you that from our experience, practices say to us, "Yeah, we know we should be doing this, but we just don't have the time, or we started doing it and it just slipped, or we don't have the knowledge and the tools that we've developed." So it's very very valuable for us to be doing it for you, just to save anybody else having to do it. For the optional additional items, then, with the recovery of missed income, we never know what we're going to find. It's as long as a piece of string. If we only find a small amount of money, and when I say small, I'm talking about £3,600 or less, our fee is £750 plus VAT. So that's what we charge. You keep all of the money that's found. But if we find more than that, you're going to want us to keep going. So we don't stop when we get to that threshold. We just keep going. And in that scenario, the back claim or the fee is just a percentage. In other words, it's pro rata. Whatever the value is, if it's above £3,600, our fee is 21% plus VAT, which effectively means it's a quarter. Now, it's that second one that almost always applies. Very rare that we find less than that. Where practices have had problems, the back claims have been tens of thousands, 50, 60, 70, sometimes more than £100,000. But in all honesty, you really want to hope that's not the case for your practice. Much better not to have lost the money in the first place. But if you're worried about your historic claims, it can be recovered. And that's all absolutely based on us being successful. In other words, if we're not successful for whatever reason, the fee is not payable. Then, if you wish us to do that, what I call that embedding of the process, then that's again a one-off fee of £1,200 plus VAT, and that includes our suite of searches and us generating an FP34 with you. So just to summarize then, why so many practices are using us? Well, number one on the list that they would tell us is that peace of mind for both the practice manager and the partners. The partners want to know, have we been paid everything? The practice manager needs to be able to answer that question and therefore have some process of making sure everything's been claimed and paid. But also driving up profits. At the end of the day, you don't want to be doing things that are losing you money. So you need to have again, the systems to allow you to maximize your profits. There's no instant fix. It's just about that over time, optimizing what you're doing. The second thing practices feedback is that having centralized expert support is just really efficient. Maintaining that knowledge of all of this is just so time consuming, but that's what we're doing full time. So being able to access that and also as the safety net. Most of our practices, most of the time, the revenue assurance reports we provide to them tell them everything's okay. That's why we call it revenue assurance. But it's very comforting to know that if something went wrong, we would spot it far more quickly. So that early detection of issues means that things can be nipped in the bud. And then, yes, and then knowing that if things were to change, again, the practice manager doesn't have to worry about keeping up with those changes. We're going to let them know as and when anything needs to change within the practice. So, yeah, there's lots of referrals I can give you from practices, but literally we're used by hundreds of practices. And what I'd like to do really now is, well, I'll just summarize the next steps, but I do now want to pause and give you opportunity to ask questions because I realize I've been talking, rabbiting away a heck of a lot. So in terms of these next steps, then I want to take questions now, but I also want to make it easy for you to engage with us if you want to progress this going forwards. So in a second, I'll give you the opportunity to request, a copy of these slides, the Compass Service Agreement. I'm not going to send it to you unless you want it, so I'll give you the opportunity to request that in a second. You can also book a one-to-one consultation. Again, it's difficult in this very large webinar, but if you want to have a one-to-one, that's fine. Or if you just want to take away the information and perhaps learn more about it, then you're very welcome to book onto one of our live webinars and learn more about this whole topic. All right, so let's pause there. And yes, please now, I'm going to check my chat to see if I've missed any questions. But please now, yeah, do give me any questions you've got and feel free to just shout out. I'm just looking at the chat now. Okay, so where do we find the NHS list price for the PPA items? The answer to that is the DM plus D. Just Google DM plus D, Dictionary of Medicines and Devices. That is the definitive source that confirms if something is a PAI. It also provides you with the list price, or not the list price, the basic price for that drug. So if ever you're in doubt, that's the place to check. Can we only purchase access to Compass spreadsheet templates? No, you can't purchase. Compass isn't something you can purchase. It's an online website that allows you access to the tools, but they're all centrally maintained. So we can't, if you like, deliver that to you because then we can't maintain it. So no, it's an online only service that you have access to for as long as you're paying the service fee. Right. So what info is needed in order to claim recover missed income? Well, as I mentioned, I can't tell you not to do it, but equally, I'm not going to advise that you should be doing it because so many practices make mistakes, and I just don't want them saying, "Well, Ashley said we could do it." To reiterate, you have to be really, really sure that everything you're claiming was purchased, given to a patient at the practice, wasn't claimed at the time, and wasn't claimed subsequently. Oh, and also that it's eligible as well. Um, so yeah, if you're able to do all those things and you're confident about what you're doing, then you can generate the claim. A prescription item that was not claimed a year ago, you go back to the consultation notes that are relevant to that item and that patient, you generate the prescription dated with that historic date. but you just include it in this month's claim. It doesn't matter that it was some time ago. With the volume vaccines, you got to again do your searches to make sure that the flu or whatever it was given and include it with the current volume vaccine claim. How long does it take? Well, if we do it, um, we do that work over the course of a week or so, and then it gets included with your next month's FP34 submission. I must just say a bit about our timescales. For those of you that want to go ahead with Compass, that's great. We can get you signed up kind of straight away. That's very quick. The training to get you going is quite quick, less than an hour. For those of you that also want the additional services, the back claiming and the embedding of our process, well, I can only say been inundated with requests, so we've got a queue. As soon as we get any order, it's booked in, but you won't be scheduled for that work until next year, into next year. Now, at any point between now and then, you can always, decline it. You're not committed, but I'm afraid it's just a bit of a wait list until that's something we can do next year. Okay. So yeah, so keep thinking with the questions. Again, feel free to shout out any questions. I'm going to provide you with a bit more information here. So this is now I've just launched another little thing which allows you just to say request, that you would like me to send you this further information. I'm also going to provide you with a link in a minute to allow you to book, as I say, a one-to-one consultation. Now, as I say, the one-to-one consultation, you don't need it. As I say, unless there's specific topics or issues or questions you've got for me, that's absolutely fine. The quickest way to get going though is to sign up to the service. And again, for those of you that would just like to get some more training, I've sent a link there for you to access the training webinars. If you join Compass, that training is included for free. But if you don't want to join Compass, that's fine. You can still access the training, and there's a small charge. Okay, so I was conscious of time, so I did rattle through that. I'm not in any hurry, so I'm very, very welcome if you've got immediate questions about any aspect of your FP34 claims or your PCSE statements or your drugs payments or your suppliers. Very happy to take questions whilst you're here with me today.
Hi, Richard.
Hello.
From CoventryGP.com. So I think from your podcast, you stated that for an average list size of 10,000, the normal income is between 50 and 70,000. Is that correct?
Yes, that'd be correct, but I must emphasize it's a very wide range depending on your demographics, the services you provide, and your policies, whether you purchase things and give them or give prescriptions to patients.
And does your search include things like optimizing your drug revenue by suggesting, well, we should have purchased this instead of actually issuing a prescription? Is that part of the service?
That's part of, well, certainly the training we provide will explain about that. And part of it, if we embed our Ashlane process, we will absolutely look at all the things you're purchasing and recommend if any changes are needed. Or as I say, in a small handful of occasions, don't purchase, give a prescription to the patient.
We also run a national booking service regarding the COVID and the flu vaccinations. Do you reconcile those as well?
Though, because the service I've been talking about is purely focused on reimbursement of drug costs through the FP34 process. So, your enhanced service payments for other things and so on is not covered by Compass.
And the vaccinations that we give our own patients with our own practice, what percentage of that makes up the total revenue?
So yeah, Yeah, right. So your flu vaccines for a typical practice can make up about half the revenue, and disproportionately more of the profit as well. But again, it just depends on demographics and everything else. But that's a sort of a typical figure.
From your experience, and this will be your last question, I promise. From your experience, what seems to be the commonest error that practices make?
Well, oh gosh, yeah, the list of errors is just as long as you're on. It's just so many different things, and I couldn't single out one or two to say, well, that's the one that you need to look out for. But because flus are the most valuable drug, they are definitely the one to take the most care over. So examples of mistakes made with flus are underclaiming, and that's because the person claiming um, doesn't necessarily have an appreciation of how many you've purchased or how many you've given. So they're just pressing buttons on a computer and assuming the computer's correct. Well, what you should do is take what the computer tells you, system one or EBS and so on, and then do some kind of checks. Like if you've had a delivery of 500 flus in September and you had a flu clinic, well, how many of those 500 are still in the building? If there's 200 in the building and you're only claiming 100, your mind should be saying, hang on, there's something not right here. I'm not saying just order 300. I'm just saying do some checks to find why you haven't got a correct claim. The second thing with flus is be careful not to overclaim. Um, Overclaiming is surprisingly easy to do, again, because people are just assuming the searches they've got are correct and pressing buttons on computers and not checking. Same principle applies. Third thing with flus is claim the correct flu. Last year, because we analysed the claims and payments for every practice in the country, last year, 1,900 practices claimed the wrong flu. They were underpaid a total of £3.2 million. Okay, because they thought they were doing the right thing, but they claimed the wrong flu. Simple as that. So yeah, those because of the value of flus, that's why I would always say that's the priority for your time.
Thank you.
In terms of other things, whilst if you're thinking of other questions, other things that you can do. Make sure again the person doing the claim knows what you're purchasing, because that way, if they see a script for a drug that isn't something you purchase, alarm bells should be ringing. By the same token, if they know what's being purchased and they don't see any scripts for those items, again, that's alarm bells will be ringing, and you can go and find out why you're not getting scripts for the things that you know you're purchasing. So it is about sort of joining the dots between what's going on in the practice. And I know that there are different people with different responsibilities, but you really need to try and take an end-to-end, perspective of this. Okay, well, I hope that you found that useful. Um, as I mentioned, there's so much more I could cover, but the best way to do that will be through the other webinars that I've mentioned. The majority of you asked for copies of the slides and for more information on how to sign up. So I will send that to you. It's pretty self-explanatory, but you've also got the option to give me a call or to request a consultation to find out more, or just to see the system in more detail, or just to ask me any specific questions relating to your practice. So thank you very much for your time today. And and good luck with your claims, because the flu season now. So this is when you need to make sure you get your income for the year.